In the basement storage of the Cairo Museum, behind locked doors and away from public view, sits a limestone block that has not been displayed since 1973. Catalogued as JE 89289, it spans just over a meter in width. Carved into its surface is a hieroglyphic scene, unlike any found in Egypt's official dynastic records. The beings carved on this block are labeled with a compound glyph that translates to "those who came before the counting of years." This title does not appear in standard dynastic texts, yet the description of these beings resurfaces in multiple ancient sources, records from civilizations with no known connection to one another. That convergence is where this investigation begins, but it's only the first of several mysteries that challenge everything we thought we knew about who built Egypt's pyramids and how they did it. The block and the beings it depicts. JE 89289 was pulled from a sealed chamber beneath the Saqqara necropolis in 1971 during excavations led by Jean-Philippe Lauer, the foremost authority on Saqqara's architecture. Lauer's field notes indicate the chamber predated the surrounding step pyramid complex by centuries. The Cairo Museum cataloged it as pre-dynastic ceremonial relief, provenance uncertain. No dedicated academic study of its carvings has ever been published. The scene carved on the block is not religious or funerary. It shows a construction sequence, figures directing the placement of massive rectangular stones using implements that do not match any known Egyptian tool. One object appears repeatedly, a rod with a forked end, held at a specific downward angle. Researchers long assumed it was a ritual object, but that explanation only held because the comparison set was incomplete. The glyph labeling these beings is specific. The compound translates to "those who came before the counting of years." Egyptian hieroglyphic grammar did not use compound titles loosely. They were precise categorical labels. That same category appears in the Turin Royal Canon, the Palermo Stone, and the walls of the Edfu temple. Three separate sources, same name, same position in the record, all placing the same group before the first human king. But if these beings were recorded in Egypt's oldest documents, and if the block depicting them was sealed beneath Saqqara's oldest architecture, the question becomes, where did this tradition originate? The answer may lie not in Egypt at all, but 7,000 years earlier and 2,000 kilometers away. The Turkey connection. Gobekli Tepe in southeastern Turkey is the oldest known ritual complex on Earth. Radiocarbon dates place its earliest occupation around 9,000 BC, with some estimates pushing its beginnings to 11,000 BC or earlier. This predates Egypt's earliest stone pyramids by roughly 7,000 years. Its T-shaped limestone pillars, some reaching up to 16 feet in height and weighing up to 15 tons each, were built before farming existed, then deliberately buried by their builders. Geophysical surveys indicate as many as 250 more megaliths lying buried around the site. Excavators estimate their work has uncovered a mere 5% of the site. The people who built it left no writing and no permanent settlement. A monument of that scale, built before farming existed, does not fit the standard model of how civilization developed. Among these pillars stands Pillar 43, known as the Vulture Stone. Carved into its surface is a figure holding a forked rod at a downward angle. The excavator, Klaus Schmidt, cataloged it as an unidentified cultic implement. There is no record that Schmidt ever knew of the Cairo block. He wasn't looking for a parallel. He found one anyway. The implement on Pillar 43 matches the one on JE 89289, not just in form, but in angle, approximately 33 degrees from the horizontal. Two sites separated by 7,000 years and thousands of kilometers. The same tool, same orientation. No known cultural bridge between them. The handbag-shaped carvings across the top of Pillar 43 appear on Mesopotamian cylinder seals thousands of years later. Nearly identical shapes show up in Mesoamerican carvings, separated by an entire ocean. 3 continents, no known contact, and the same carved outline appears in each. The mainstream explanation is independent invention, the same tool shape arising naturally in different places. That works for a single parallel. But When the same implement appears at both sites inside a matching construction sequence, held by beings labeled as something other than ordinary, the explanation requires increasingly unlikely coincidences. The convergence points to something mainstream archaeology cannot easily explain. But the evidence doesn't stop with carved stone. It extends into the very DNA of the people buried beneath Saqqara, the same site where JE 89289 was found. The genomic anomaly at Saqqara. In 2019, researchers at the University of Copenhagen sequenced genetic material from 166 individuals drawn from pre-dynastic and early dynastic Egyptian burial sites. The study confirmed known migration patterns and received widespread attention. But buried in the supplementary data, Table S7, was an anomaly. 4 individuals from a pre-dynastic burial layer at Saqqara, the same complex where JE 89289 was found, carry a Y chromosome haplogroup variant that does not match any known branch of the human lineage. The authors flagged it as a low-confidence call, possible sequencing artifact. No follow-up analysis has ever been published. The 4 individuals remain in the dataset, unresolved. The carved evidence and the DNA both point to a population that predates dynastic Egypt. The very beings labeled on JE 89289 as those who came before the counting of years. But even if we accept they existed, how did they build these monuments? Recent research offers surprising answers that may finally explain the construction methods depicted on the block itself. The hydraulic lift theory. In 2024, a team of French researchers published a study in PLOS One proposing an entirely new mechanism. Their analysis focused on the Step Pyramid of Djoser, the oldest of Egypt's monumental pyramids, built around 2680 BC, the very complex beneath which JE 89289 was found sealed. From transdisciplinary analysis, the researchers discovered that a hydraulic lift may have been used to build the pyramid. Based on mapping of the nearby watersheds, they showed that one of the unexplained massive Saqqara structures, the Geyser El Mudir enclosure, has the features of a check dam intended to trap sediment and water. The topography beyond the dam suggests a possible ephemeral lake west of the Djoser complex and water flow inside the dry moat surrounding it. In the southern section of the moat, they identified a monumental linear rock cut structure consisting of successive deep compartments that combines the technical requirements of a water treatment facility: a settling basin, a retention basin, and a purification system. Together, the Geyser El Mudir and the dry moat's inner south section work as a unified hydraulic system that improves water quality and regulates flow for practical purposes. The team calculated that this system could have lifted significant loads. This work opens a new line of research: the use of hydraulic force to erect the massive structures built by pharaohs. Landro, the lead author, noted that the very first pyramid texts appear only about the 5th dynasty, and they're speaking about structures in the 3rd dynasty. They have almost nothing. The absence of documentation means technological innovations could have been forgotten and rediscovered across generations. It's a compelling theory, but not the only one. Another recent study offers an entirely different mechanism, and it comes from inside the Great Pyramid itself. The pulley and counterweight theory. In 2025, scientist Simon Andreas Scheuring published a paper in NPJ Heritage Science proposing that the Great Pyramid was built using an internal pulley and counterweight system, rather than relying on external ramps. The study introduces a radical idea. The Great Pyramid itself was a machine, a self-contained system designed to lift and place its own building blocks. This concept challenges centuries of theories centered on large external ramps and sheer manpower. Scheuring's evidence comes from the pyramid's internal architecture. Key architectural features inside the pyramid support this model. Scheuring identifies the Grand Gallery and ascending passage as sloped ramps where counterweights were likely slid downward to generate force. The antechamber, long thought to be a security feature, is reinterpreted as a pulley-like mechanism that helped lift even the heaviest blocks, some weighing up to 60 tons, to the upper levels. Crucially, Schering argues that the structure was not built symmetrically from the ground up. Instead, it grew from a central starting point where internal passages split, expanding upward and outward in phases. This approach allowed builders to place heavy blocks at great heights more efficiently and without relying on the massive ramps traditional theories require. These ramps would have been larger than the pyramid itself, for which no evidence has ever been found. The machine-like construction process also helps explain several unusual features of the pyramid: the irregular positioning of internal chambers, the variation in layer thickness, the slight concavity of the outer faces, and the vertical groove down the center of each side, all align with the internal lifting model. Even the recently discovered voids inside the pyramid appear to be consistent with the locations of vertical shafts or workspaces used in this process. By using counterweights and pulley-like setups on sliding stone ramps, workers could generate the force needed to lift blocks while minimizing friction. The study describes how ropes were threaded over wood beams inside the antechamber to lift materials through shafts, making the pyramid itself a tool of its own creation. The varied block heights in the pyramid, which taper toward the top, Schering says, are a signature of the physics of lifting blocks on ropes. The courses get thinner within each section, as it is much easier to pull a hanging weight laterally when it is still hanging on a long rope, while it gets ever more difficult to extract it from a shorter rope. The theory also addresses the scale of the project. Given that the pyramid contains more than 2 million blocks and rises nearly 146 meters, any realistic construction plan must explain how such a feat was achieved with ancient technology. Schering's model distributes the work across all 4 faces of the pyramid using multiple lifting points, making such speed and scale physically plausible and maintaining the astonishing pace of placing one block every 1 to 3 minutes over the course of roughly 20 years. What's missing is the shaft through which stones were lifted. This shaft is now filled in, but Schering believes it could still be detectable beneath the antechamber. Whether archaeologists will look depends on how his theory is received. Still, the existence of internal workspaces is not just theoretical. In 2017, a major discovery confirmed that hidden voids exist inside the Great Pyramid, spaces that may have served exactly the functions Schering describes. The Scan Pyramid's Void Discovery. In 2017, the Scan Pyramids project published a discovery in the journal Nature that Egyptology had not anticipated. Using cosmic ray muon detectors, 3 independent teams confirmed a large void above the Grand Gallery in Khufu's pyramid. The void runs at least 30 meters long, with a cross-section comparable to the Grand Gallery itself beneath it. 3 separate detector technologies independently confirmed it: nuclear emulsion plates, scintillators, and gas detectors. This is the first major unexplored structure found inside the Great Pyramid since the 19th century. In 2023, a second corridor-shaped void was precisely measured behind the pyramid's north face, running roughly 9 meters long. Both voids exist only as density maps, produced by particles passing through the stone from outside. Neither has been physically entered. What makes this significant is that these voids align with the internal construction methods depicted on JE 89289 and described in the Edfu texts. The Egyptologist Mark Lenner has suggested these voids may have been designed to relieve structural pressure, but their precise placement and size remain unexplained. The fact that hidden chambers exist exactly where internal lifting mechanisms would require space suggests the builders of the Great Pyramid may have employed the same construction methods recorded on the limestone block sealed beneath Saqqara. But the question of who those builders were received a surprising answer in 2025 from a genome sequenced from a man buried during the Pyramid Age. The Nuweirat genome. The DNA of the people buried beneath Saqqara, the same complex where JE 89289 was found, had already yielded a genomic anomaly. 4 individuals from a pre-dynastic burial layer carried a Y chromosome variant that did not match any known branch of the human lineage. In July 2025, researchers at the Francis Crick Institute and Liverpool John Moores University published a landmark study in Nature that added another layer of evidence. They sequenced the first complete whole genome ever recovered from ancient Egypt, from an adult male excavated at Nuweirat, about 265 kilometers south of Cairo, radiocarbon dated to between 2855 and 2570 BC. His remains had been excavated in 1902 by British archaeologist John Garstang. They were donated to the World Museum in Liverpool, where they survived a Nazi bombing that destroyed most of the anthropological collection. The genome revealed roughly 80% North African ancestry. The remaining 20% traced directly to the Eastern Fertile Crescent, specifically Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq. This is genetic proof of population movement between Egypt and Mesopotamia, visible at the individual level for the first time. The man's skeletal remains revealed a life of hard physical labor, despite his high-status burial in a ceramic pot within a rock-cut tomb. His worn teeth, severe arthritis in his neck, and muscle markings on his arms and legs were consistent with the movements and positions of a potter. This trade originated in Mesopotamia and reached Egypt precisely during his lifetime. The pottery wheel from Mesopotamia first appeared in Egypt during the Old Kingdom, coinciding with the construction of iconic pyramids such as Djoser's Step Pyramid and Khufu's Great Pyramid. If 20% of this pyramid-era individual's ancestry was Mesopotamian, and if the forked rod on JE 89289 matches implements carved at Gobekli Tepe 7,000 years earlier, this suggests a continuous cultural and genetic thread, connecting the builders of Egypt's oldest monuments to populations originating in the Fertile Crescent. The contact between Egypt and Mesopotamia was not limited to objects and imagery. It encompassed human migration. But if builders from Mesopotamia brought their knowledge to Egypt, what happened to that knowledge after the pyramids were built? The Westcar Papyrus records that Pharaoh Khufu himself was searching for ancient documents to guide his works at Giza. These documents may have contained the very knowledge recorded on JE 89289. The Westcar Papyrus and Khufu's ancient documents. The Westcar Papyrus, which dates to around 1650 BC but was copied from an older document now lost, provides evidence that ancient knowledge was still being consulted thousands of years after it was first recorded. The papyrus contains 5 stories told at the royal court of King Khufu by his sons. In the text, Khufu asks a magician named Djed for the number of the secret chambers of the sanctuary of Thoth, knowledge he wished to copy for his temple. Djed replies that though he did not know this information himself, he knew where it could be found, inside a flint box in a room called Revision in Heliopolis. I.E.S. Edwards, formerly keeper of Egyptian antiquities at the British Museum, pointed out that Heliopolis had been a center of astronomical science closely connected to Giza since time immemorial, and that the title of the high priest of that city was Chief of the Astronomers. The Egyptologist F.W. Green added that the inventory building appears to have been a chart room where plans were made and stored. Similarly, Sir Alan H. Gardner argued that the room must have been an archive, and that Khufu was seeking details concerning the secret chambers of the primeval sanctuary of Thoth. If Khufu consulted ancient documents to guide his works at Giza, this implies that the knowledge recorded on JE 89289, the construction methods of those who came before, was still being studied and incorporated into the design of the Great Pyramid itself. Sacred Engineering and the Djed Axis. A 2025 paper presents a unified model for Old Kingdom pyramid construction that integrates astronomical observation, ritual metrology, and practical geometry into a single system of sacred engineering. The study proposes that ancient Egyptian builders employed a central plumbed pole, the Djed axis, as both engineering datum and ritual backbone of stability. The model identifies 3 coupled subsystems: astronomical orientation via the PJ-Shiz, stretching the cord ceremony using circumpolar star observation, vertical metrological renewal through serialized Djed raising events performed every 28 royal cubits, and geometric control through a center pole and stringline system that maintained the Seked slope ratio of 5.5 palms per cubit. Together, these formed a continuum of practice where measurement itself was ritual and precision was an act of ma'at, cosmic order. The hypothesis predicts a central axial cavity, or density anomaly, within the Great Pyramid, potentially observable through high-sensitivity muon tomography in upcoming exploration missions. The pyramid texts provide direct textual confirmation that the king ascends on the backbone of Osiris, the central axis identified hieroglyphically as the Djed pillar. The stretching of the cord ceremony described in the Edfu building texts, one of the sources that names the same beings as JE 89289, is directly referenced in this sacred engineering model. The beings labeled on JE 89289 as those who came before the counting of years may have been the original practitioners of this sacred engineering tradition, establishing the template that all later Egyptian temples were designed to replicate. The measuring rod and cord described in the Edfu texts as part of the builder's foundation ceremony are the same tools used in the Djed axis construction system. If the Djed axis represents the fusion of astronomical observation, ritual metrology, and practical geometry, then JE 89289 may depict this very system in action. Figures directing stone placement using tools that maintain alignment with the stars and the cosmic order. Both the hydraulic lift and the pulley counterweight system offer plausible explanations for how the pyramids were built, but neither answers the deeper question: who were the beings depicted on JE 89289, and where did the Egyptians say they came from? The Edfu temple texts provide an answer, one that Egyptology has largely ignored, yet directly connects to the beings labeled on the Cairo block. The Edfu building texts. The Temple of Edfu, built between 237 and 57 BC, is the best preserved temple in Egypt. Its walls carry the Edfu building texts, first cleared by French Egyptologist Auguste Mariette in the 19th century. Manchester University scholar A. Raymond published the standard academic study of these texts in 1969. The texts describe Edfu itself as a copy of a far older, mythical temple. That original temple stood on a primeval island, according to the inscriptions, before the known world was created. The text names its builders the Shebto, translated variously as the Wise Ones, the Divine Ones, or the Builder Gods. These builders did not emerge from Egypt. The texts describe their arrival after a catastrophe that destroyed their original homeland entirely. The Edfu texts include flood imagery in which primeval waters gradually recede, exposing a mound beneath them. The texts describe the founding moment in precise terms: a measuring cord, a foundation stake, and a specific orientation. The first temple was established within an enclosure of approximately 300 by 400 cubits. Foundation ceremonies are described in detail: the stretching of the cord ritual, the naming of the temple, the festival of entering. What makes this significant is the specificity. The texts don't describe gods in the abstract. They describe builders who arrived from elsewhere, established a template for construction, and were later absorbed into Egypt's divine framework. Raymond noted that the Edfu material appeared to preserve the oldest conception of the Earth's origin. The builders' names appear artificial, formed on the idea of constructing. The texts describe the builder's island homeland using the same language other ancient traditions use for an antediluvian world. This is the same category of beings labeled on JE 89289 as those who came before the counting of years. The Edfu texts describe them as builders who arrived from a lost homeland after a catastrophe. The Turian royal canon and the Palermo stone place them before the first human king. JE 89289 depicts them directing a construction sequence using tools that match those carved at Gobekli Tepe 7,000 years earlier. And the scanned pyramid's voids and the Djed axis engineering system may represent the physical remnants of their methods. Thanks for watching. Now check out the videos popping up on screen for more unbelievable stories.